What is the best property type? What is the dream 40? I asked Thomas Mlsna of Wisconsin what he thinks makes a great hunting parcel, and I think that there's some great information here. If you're looking to buy a piece of ground, keep these things in the back of your mind, and I think you're going to make a better purchase. So my name is Jake Hofer. I'm the co-owner of Exodus, a real estate broker here in the state of Illinois, and it is my goal to help educate folks prior to purchasing their first piece of ground. We podcast every single Monday, uploads here on this channel every Thursday and Saturday. Hope you guys enjoy this conversation. If you do, hit the like button and subscribe. Now let's go. Is there an ideal property type that you think is the best? Is it abandoned pasture ground? Is it hardwoods? Is it a mix of all? I mean, give me your dream 40, I guess, if you had to break it down in percentages.
I guess my dream 40, it's hard to say, like the lay of land. I love hills, right? And changes in topography creates more surface area, more room for deer to run, more cover. Topography is the best form of cover. And we've talked about this before. Pressure is what's going to limit your potential. And the only way to reduce pressure, keep pressure off, is with cover or consistency. And when you have topography, it creates great cover if you're lacking quality vegetation. But when it comes down to my dream 40, again, peel back a little bit and look at the bigger picture. If I can have the perfect 40 acres, I want a 40-acre chunk that's essentially a travel corridor between two bigger chunks of land.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I want a property where deer are moving through as much as possible if the area lends for deer to be held in that area. Now, obviously, if you're in an area with a lot of pressure, then I want a place where deer feel secure as a sanctuary. But, again, the ideal 40 would be an area that's got a travel corridor through it that I can put food in to slow those deer down, add that cover, slow those deer down, make them feel secure. But it gives me the opportunity to slip in there and slip out, and I'm not fighting the issues with deer being there when I go in or being there when I try and leave. And again, it all comes down to the pressure. Mm-hmm. and keeping that pressure off the property, or not just keeping the pressure off the property, but on the relative scale is making sure your pressure is lower than the neighbors. Because the analogy I like to use with that is if you picture a partially deflated air mattress, right? When you look at that air mattress, it looks pretty normal if it's just sitting there, right? It's partially deflated, but you can't really tell. But now if you step on one end of it, where does all that air go? Goes to the far end. Sure. And that's the same when you're talking about mature bucks and pressure. They're going to go to where the least amount of pressure is. And so if you put pressure on your property, they go out. They move away right away. And that can sometimes be a problem too. So if you're looking at a hunting property, and the neighboring property is this big chunk of timber that never gets hunted, it's great to have that sanctuary there, and it's definitely advantageous to you. But you have to be conscious of that, because if you put pressure on, they know where the low pressure spot is that they can disappear into. Yeah. And if there's no pressure there, then they never get stirred back up again. So you just have to make sure that you're providing something that's attractive and appealing for them to come in. Mm-hmm. But yeah, to answer that question, my perfect 40 is going to be a mix, but the big thing is I want a place where I can put some food and there's adequate cover. But the biggest thing is that access. And if I can find a property that's major travel corridor and provides food and cover in there, that's what I want to go for. Mm-hmm. It's also a lot easier to manage a property like that too. Smaller property.
What about the end of the road type properties, meaning not necessarily a physical road, but you're in bluff country where the bluffs end and it starts to be where it flattens out and it's big ag country, and it's like these big blocks of timber, then they kind of get snaked out, and then it ends into like more, I would say, rolling cattle pasture, and then that meets big ag. What about something like that?
In a situation like that, going back to wind dictating where those bucks bed more often than not, I really want to look for a property where those hillsides are facing either the south or they're facing southeast-ish. So you're getting those west winds, those northwest winds during the hunting season that are kind of pushing over those bucks. Yep. And that's where they want to be. And and then I just killed a buck a couple of years ago hunting a similar layout to that. If your access, again, it all comes back to access, right? If you can get up in those spots and hunt them in the mornings, especially during the rut, you slip into those bedding areas, it can be a hot ticket. You just have to understand that, because it's not a property that's going to be conducive to hunting throughout the season. Early in the season, you really, unless you have the intel that promotes an aggressive move, you want to stay out of those bedding areas, stay away from the bedding areas. Mm-hmm. And then you want to hunt the food and, the transition areas to food. If you have a property that lends for good bedding, the end of the road property, like you're talking, where those deer go during the day and that's where they spend most of their time, then I want to look for a bedding area that lends for good bedding on some variation of a west wind, because that's your predominant wind direction. Mm-hmm. On the front edge of most cold fronts, you're going to get a flip out of the east, but that's generally for a short period of time. If you can play those movements that are promoted by wind changes, those deer go back in those areas where they're most comfortable when the wind goes back to the common consistent wind. So that's what I'm looking for there. Now, that's not to say that a property that opens up the other way isn't huntable. It's just huntable on less wind directions. If you have a property that hunts better on any variation of west wind, you're going to have a lot more opportunities to hunt than a property that hunts only on east winds.
We just had a podcast. We had a conversation with a gentleman named Perry Russo out of Michigan, and he loves east winds, and I'm sure it's partially because his property's set up for east winds and they don't happen often, so you stay out of there, and then it's just a perfect storm for a good hunt, usually in correlation to a major weather change as well. So